my first question. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? Why are you committed to entrepreneurship and innovation here in Miami?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm originally from New Orleans, and I sort of started out seeing the disparities in education. So from there, I wanted to address them, and I felt like the best way to address them was within the school system. But my mother was a community organizer, so she always taught me to, it was just natural to care about the environment and to have gardens and to do economic development work, sort of as a part of the work that we were doing. And so within the educational sector, I worked really hard to sort of incorporate those two things. And eventually I learned that they weren't neatly fit together as much as I wanted them to be. So I moved into entrepreneurship simply because I felt like that would be the best venue. I learned really quickly that you can't empower kids if the adults don't have jobs. So we were doing great work, and the kids in the community were flourishing, but it was a food desert, or there was no employment for them to go home to, especially in the post-Katrina reality. We had a lot of, the middle class was kind of offset as a result of the teaching shortage, and as a result of the fact that in most cities, the middle class is typically the educators. So people didn't have jobs. And so one of the things that I learned really quickly is that if we don't create jobs and access for people, we can't empower whole communities. And while education is very important, there has to be an understanding of how to create viability for the adults also within the community. I'm a researcher by nature, so what made sense to me in that frame of doing that work was doing something around green tech. So again, being from New Orleans, having a passion for the environment, knowing that green was sort of something that was natural to me and natural to how I felt the community worked, we incorporated those things, and that's how I came up with
I'm so fascinated by the answer that I actually need you to repeat the question. Like,
Sure. A little bit about your story. Why are you committed to entrepreneurship, innovation, technology here in Miami?
Here in Miami. Okay. Part of it's metaphor, but part of it's real. Miami's just a fertile location. It kind of came to me right after Katrina once again, and how quickly everything grew back. I was kind of daydreaming because we didn't have to go to work for about a week. But after that moment, when I saw how different people reacted to our version of Katrina Wilma, how the city kind of got devastated, and things shut down, and then how things were built back up, it was this idea that you could do something here that you can't do in other places that easily. I'm a New Yorker, and I go to New York all the time, and I go to Chicago all the time, and if you want to do things there, you got to know someone, and you have to have a certain amount of capital, and it takes you a long amount of time to be able to accomplish anything, even the most minuscule thing like opening up a restaurant. But here, if you have an idea, there's at least the possibility of it. Not for everyone, which is, I guess, why we're all here today, but there appears to be that opportunity, especially since we have smaller municipalities like Opa-locka, North Miami, that you can get a control of things at the macro as well as the micro level.
Well, first of all, I want to say I want to have lots of pictures taken of me and this very young thing. Lots of pictures of that. Well, you know, everything's about narrative, right? So I'm a native Miamian, probably the only one in this room. If there's somebody else, please raise your hand. Okay. Oh, wow. This is unusual. Hey, y'all, right? Glad to meet you. So the narrative of this center is 25 years old. It was created in the aftermath of a series of civil disturbances in the 1980s. And so it was a response from community leaders and the college itself to say, how can we do something meaningful in the aftermath of this unrest that occurred that was more than about certainly poor relationships between community and law enforcement in Miami. But it also just underscored a need for communities like this to have more economic diversification. And the answer was, let's focus on entrepreneurship. Because at one time in kind of modern history, this corridor that we're on right now was a vibrant center of economic activity before that in the American community. And so for throughout its 25-year history, the expectation for the center and a lot of its work has been to serve as a broker, a convener of conversations about how do we engage and serve as the how can I say, translator for these communities, for our community, in terms of connecting them to what's happening in the macro economy and not just doing the same thing that they see happening, that we see now happening in downtown and Brickell, but how do we interpret that for the communities that we care about? So Felicia mentioned that I'm on the board of the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust, and that board is concerned with 28 targeted urban areas that exist throughout Miami-Dade County. And those are areas that have been historically Black and brown neighborhoods throughout Miami-Dade County. So the role of the center has been obviously to educate, because what I realized very quickly when I came up here 13 years ago is that if we're really going to see a level of vibrancy return to these communities, then it has to start with ensuring that everybody gets an education. Right? So if I were a selective institution and I only selected people who come to Miami-Dade who had a certain SAP score, a certain ACT, and certain grades coming out of high school, then that gives you a really nice platform on which to talk about things like entrepreneurship, innovation. But our work here first was to be able to educate people and to give them the basic tools around which they can really be successful entrepreneurs. So I was given the opportunity to be the center director here, and a part of our story is I was raised 3 miles from here. So did all the undergraduate work here. So I have a very personal and professional connection to this work and what we try to do at the center, especially now. Because the activity that we're seeing, we probably could not have convened this conversation 5 years ago, right? And gotten people to understand and care and see themselves as being a part of it. But now the activity is at a feverish, pun intended, pace. So it's at a feverish pace. And so it's a really good time for us to not only harness the 3,000 students that are in this building, but this campus is going to empower the 50,000 students that we have here at our campus and creating a truly entrepreneurial climate for them, and also continuing to make available new opportunities for learning and training and engagement, so that communities outside of downtown, outside of Brickell, but Miami Gardens, Overblock, can figure out what this means for them and how they can have some of that energy and vitality take place in their own community. So that's how we come back.
How did I become an entrepreneur here in Miami? Why? Well, plainly put, this is where I landed. I've been here for more than 26 years, and originally up in Jamaica. And if anyone's from the island, you know the story of the mom or dad that goes away abroad and leaves her kids behind, only to get them visas and whatnot. And so I'm one of 5 of those kids, and so my brothers, majority of them are older than I am, so I was really way down on the list as far as getting here. But while I was here, when I came here, I landed on Miami Beach, and essentially I went to Beach High, had a great experience there. There is where I actually started to learn diversity. Essentially from there, Miami-Dade, FIU, and whatnot. But being in Miami, there was never a side, essentially, that I chose to emulate. My mom essentially told me, once I got here, you're in a different culture, so to speak, cultural environment, but just be yourself. And I've always been driven to this one thing that, I need to build my own house. And it's sort of like where we're at right now with my platform journey, the whole freelance sort of culture. Building your own house rather than building someone else's. And of course you have to work collaboratively at times, to build as a community. But, for me here, there are many great opportunities, not only to choose from within your own group, to say, we stay on our own side, but, I've learned conversational Spanish by being here. That's amazing. My friends growing up were of all sorts, Latinos. So, for me, it wasn't just, okay, there was a one-sided sort of, experience. So I can't just speak, that I grew up in the, say, Liberty City, Overtown, or any specific Black neighborhood. I was in Miami Beach. So I saw everything that happened there. I saw, the first gay club opened up around my, the corner from my street. A majority of my friends, as I say, they're all mixed. So the cool thing about this area is that diversity has really enriched my life and who I've become. And I try to pour that into what I'm doing as an entrepreneur and developing, my brand and trying to get out there and connecting. And I tell anyone who is asking me advice or looking to me as a mentor, saying, listen, you really have to get out of your comfort zone. Don't ever try to stick to what you know. Okay, get out and connect. I don't care if they look like you or they don't look like you. The important thing is to draw knowledge from where you can find knowledge, okay, and implement that for you and help you succeed and help your community succeed. So, for me, being in Miami and being able to connect with all those who, I've connected with, whether it's at the lab, and some of you are from the lab, and Refresh Miami and whatnot, that I've, called on you for different things. But listen, for me, it's about stepping out of your comfort zone and really pulling knowledge from wherever you can get that, as long as it helps you succeed and get where you need to go.
I would thank Lee Tony again, Miami-Dade Community College, Refresh Miami. We would like to thank Knight Foundation, the Miami Herald, all the people who support us for these events. I got into entrepreneurship. I got inspired at a young age. In my first grade year in elementary school, my family reunion I'm from a small city in Bainbridge, Georgia. So we had a family reunion and fashion show. So I dressed up as a businessman. So I had my ugly green black pinstripe suit and a briefcase with some grits in it. Because grits were my favorite food at the time. My great grandmother gave them to me. And that, I look at that, I look at things as cycles. All the things that I wanted to accomplish in life are still things that you really want to accomplish, but they happen in cycles. So at the time I said I wanted to be a businessman in the food industry. You look a couple of years back and you look at Feverish Pops, which is a food business. It just so happened that it took 20 years for it to happen. So that's what I got. That's where I got my desire to become an entrepreneur. And another incident that happened to my father. My father graduated from Albany State, business major. He worked for a local insurance company. And he was hired to bring in all of the rural blacks to create insurance policies. He did that, made this a successful business, and then the gentleman fired him and hired his cousin because she was unemployed from another job. And he told me from that day forward he would never work for anybody else and that I should concentrate on being an entrepreneur. And from that day forward, I've been focusing on that and reading, in middle school, reading books, reading the autobiography of Warren Buffett and studying how to do stocks and accounting and finance. So that propelled everything that came after.
So one of the main reasons we decided to do this panel is because a similar topic took place a few weeks ago out in the Bay Area after Google released their diversity numbers. So this has been a conversation I think that has kind of been brewing, but not until they released their numbers did everyone say, oh shit, excuse my language, we really have to do something, we have to have a dialogue about this. And I think the most startling part about the numbers and really bringing it full circle was Google's diversity number, 30% women and 2% black. And that's a little on both sides, I think, right? But of course, major corporations can do a little bit more. But since Google released their numbers, Facebook released their numbers, Twitter released their numbers, a bunch of other companies followed suit and released their numbers, and they all kind of look exactly the same. So can you guys talk a little bit about this diversity problem when you talk about our community, but then what can we do about it? We'll start with Andrew, then go down. Is that cool?
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I saw Angela Benson's post on a matter of Google. I guess, I don't know the full story, in essence, to say, well, how many blacks applied for a job at Google? And if they did, would they qualify for the positions that they were applying for. So the thing is, I don't know the full story of everything, and of course we can definitely put a color on the number and just call it that's the problem. We need to get the full story and all that, and that's why, I'm very much adamant about leaving sort of like, and I may get in trouble for this, but an entitlement mentality. Okay, we're not entitled to anything. Okay, we have the ability to become educated. We have opportunities out there. The internet is huge, and if you have access to the web, you can basically learn how to build something on your own. And I know that there are public libraries and different programs that are out there. I'm talking on the most basic level. Of course, I'm not saying that there's not a real issue that exists, okay, and that we can definitely be a lot more effective in hiring, different ethnicities and whatnot. But I really want us to kind of examine, qualifications. No one's going to hire you if they don't feel as if you don't match with the culture of their company. You don't know how to code well, but you don't understand necessarily, where they're going with their mission and whatnot. And and of course, they're hiring managers and whatnot that might have biases. But again, I don't know the full story. So from my perspective right now, I just really would like to say that, we obviously, have to think. Not in a traditional sense that we're entitled to something to get somewhere, but rather that make sure that we're getting the full story of that the qualifications are being met, and that these companies they do want to have you in their fold.
Okay, I think we're entitled to a fair chance. So yes, we are entitled to it, and I think that the issue stems from even their recruiting practices. If you research those companies, their recruiting practices is strictly Ivy League institutions. It's top tech companies, or top tech schools like Stanford, Caltech. So if your recruiting practices are only going to those institutions that do not, where black people and Latino people do not scale highly on the admissions to those institutions, you're going to have that issue. And then you have the discriminatory practices within the departments themselves, computer science and the engineering departments, where they're mostly masculine. So they don't allow minorities, or they don't cater to minorities or feel good with minorities in there, however you want to phrase it, or women. So I'm happy that it's at least 30% women, because most of the time those are the first ones that they try to get out of those technology programs. So that's one plus, is that women in general are being hired into those fields. But yes, we do deserve a fair chance, because we have a ton of qualified individuals coming from HBCUs, all these top other institutions, and most of my friends are with the NSA and with the CIA and the FBI. They're the ones phone tapping you and doing all the cryptography stuff. So they're qualified. I speak to them on a regular basis, and that's how I feel.
So it reminds me of Saturday Night Live when they said they couldn't find any black female comics, right? And I'm like, well, I know you folks said, well, I know there are black female comics, right? I mean, I saw this video kind of twice in a week, and I was telling my husband, why does the video keep showing up in my feed? But it's a video that talks about, we live in a society right now where there's all this kind of dog whispering coded language that goes on around anything that has to do with people of color. And so if Google and all these other organizations are releasing numbers, certainly they must feel some corporate responsibility around these are not numbers that they themselves are proud of, right? And I think, as with most things for communities of color, it has very much to do with, exposure and education and then opportunity. Right? So what do our schools look like in communities that cater to black and brown people? What types of programs are available? A significant number, if you look at from the 60s forward, even earlier, of the black upper middle class were educated at historically black colleges and universities. So we have to look at which institutions are producing the majority of our graduates. And even now, where these institutions are not the automatic go-to place for young people going to college, and even my in college, we graduate more African American than any institution in the country. So we have to look at the availability of resources and who's educating our students and what resources and supports are around them. I know in the last decade, STEM has been very much the conversation at our institution and at institutions like it. So we may now begin to see increasingly more numbers of minority, Black and brown folks engaged in STEM careers. But I cannot not respond to this language of entitlement. So the video that I referenced earlier talked about when the United States was giving away land in the Midwest and in the West, and they literally were giving land to farmers to farm. And not only that, they created land grant institutions to educate them on the best and most effective farming practices. And they put additional resources out in these areas, county agents that would do the job of furthering educating people. So there were subsidies, and there was this layer of support, and then it came a time where they received subsidies not to farm. So that's a lot of support that was given to folks to engage in a particular type of activity. And some might consider today those to be entitlements. Right? And those are not entitlements that went to my grandfather or my great-grandfather, right? So if we have these systems of supports that are given to certain populations, the majority population in this country, to help them be successful in their field, I don't think we should see it as an entitlement if we were to see that same type of support is given to areas and industries where we see the kind of imbalances that we're seeing in the tech sector.
And I do agree with you on that. Support systems are, I think, are one thing, but wait for someone to come to you versus you going out there, being assertive to get it. I think is a different scenario, and that's what I'm trying to address. We can't sit back and not be proactive, be very assertive. Run our way through into the system and make it happen for us. Again, get out of your comfort zone. Who do you network with? Who do you connect with? Are you simply looking within your group versus let me go find out what's happening in, say, I don't know, Little Havana, or what's going on down, in Kendall, or whatever it might be. So I guess, what I'm trying to say here is just not to be comfortable in waiting, but rather be assertive to get out there.
Okay. First, I'd just like to thank Felicia for putting this together. I think that this panel is actually a representation of what is to come or what should come, because no one perspective or person has the right approach, right? And one size doesn't fit all, as we're starting to learn. So there's like little bits of wisdom here, and I think the one thing that might unite us all, if you were to ask us our personal stories, is that there's still wisdom behind us at some level. There's grandparents and great-grandparents that we probably sat down and talked with, right? So for instance, like I've had a weird kind of month, and in one hand I got to sit and hear Harry Belafonte in a small room talk to sort of juveniles who had gotten out of the prison system, and he was just talking to them, 12 of them, straight up about what they should do. He was talking about what he did with Malcolm, he was talking about strategy, he was talking about surviving. And then just this morning, I'm over at Miami Northwestern, and Bob Moses is sitting in there, and we just sit in the library and talk for like an hour about everything from what boards people were on that allowed him to not be in jail more than one night in Mississippi. So he's like explaining the Mellon Foundation and the family, who married who, and how that all trickles down to him spending only one night in jail in Mississippi as opposed to weeks in jail in Mississippi, right? So the stories that I read growing up about both of these men, they start to give us the backstory. So what I basically, I think the overall thing I'm saying, just trying to be really brief, is like in our community, more conversation between generations, and that the flow goes both ways. Because the young generation, like they're on another level. Like they've got 2 devices, and we're calling them ADD, but they're not. They're just like super complex. And if we can just harness the energy that they have with the wisdom from another generation and really start talking back and forth much more, because we've really stopped talking. I mean, we do a lot because we're in triage. Most of the time we have to deal with a couple of murders a month, right? And we got all this other stuff going on. And so when we finally get through with all that, we don't have time to talk about anything else. That doesn't count working and everything else that we have going on. But if we like sort of what Jared said and what Derek says, like be a mentor, like we have to take that like it's like going to church every Sunday, like visiting a grandparent. Like it has to be a duty, like you have to mentor a certain amount of people and you have to be mentored by a certain number of people. And we have to rebuild that into our culture.
Yesterday I was listening to Les Brown. He's a motivational speaker, and he said, you know, we have all these little league programs where we're teaching kids basketball and football at a young age. And what happened to little league cardiology? What happened to little league cold fever? Like it's happening slowly, but we weren't thinking about sort of creating this pipeline in that way. And it's not something unique to the Black community. It's kind of something that is endemic of the American reality right now. Across the board, there is disparities in terms of what we get in education. It just hits poor communities harder, and the Black community in large part makes up part of that community. So it ergo goes to say that it'll disproportionately hit that population. I think for me, circling back to the question, I think that in order to address the diversity issue, you have to address both sides. There's the side of adults, and what do we do with the adults that are here right now and creating access for them? Because the thing that I'm present to is, and part of why I left education, is that you literally cannot affect children from a social service, ministry kind of framework, and that's what our educational system has turned into. It's not taking the people who are the immediate mentors and the immediate role models for the children and having them being the ones speak to them. You can't reform or generate a community from the outside in. It has to be generated sort of from itself, or else it'll only have a short-term last. And I think for me, it's like it's not a Black issue, it's not a white issue. It's like, how do we survive as a planet? Like, we are like locusts on Earth right now, just the human race. And of course, our community ends up reaping the most of the damage and perpetrating a lot of the damage again, just because of the role that poverty plays in that. And I think fundamentally, our products are mid to low tech. So we produce things like forks made out of potatoes, and we're talking about engineering innovations and mid to low tech technology, not necessarily coding or web-based innovations, but more things that you can taste, touch, and feel. And I think fundamentally that's our legacy. As America, we created products. Literally, we wouldn't be the power that we are today if we didn't create stuff and then sell it to the rest of the world. And Black people play an essential role in that process. From the beginning, if you want to go back to the continent, to now. Like, there's scientists everywhere in every field, not just IT, but in engineering, in brain surgery, in physics, and like, we produce science. It's just getting people aware that that is sort of our inheritance, first as Americans, then as Black Americans, then as citizens and stewards of the earth. Like, we learn how to take something that was given to us by nature and create something else out of it. That's part of what makes us the most sophisticated species. I think we just forgot that that is our possibility. And I mean, for me, it's just really collapsing those things and then reminding people. And reminding the people who have the agency to teach children, the agency to empower their communities, that they have a role, and entrepreneurship is the way to go about it. Like, again, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's what our country was founded on. I mean, we literally could be American, and we outsourced it all the time, and look at how they grew in 10 years. Literally, in the past 10 years, they have flourished on what? Products. They produce stuff. Our stuff that we used to produce that we were too good for, and decided that we would let somebody else do it. We produce, and we produce it better. Nobody's complaining about that than anybody else. Apple creates the products here and then lets them build it. But the innovation, the design, it comes from us. It doesn't just have to be clothing. It doesn't just have to be the best move in basketball. It doesn't just have to, like, we can be innovative in every area. And to me, it's inherently who we are. And so that's the sort of ancestral piece, and talking to the elders and talking to, because it's not new. It's really just reminding people of who we are and giving them access to tinker with devices, to break apart the phone, to break apart the computer, and then to build it back up. Like, I mean, I think how many opportunities do we give children, adults, even like